Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. First hour is general discussion about media and virtual production, anything that you ask in our little question system, Mukana. Second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. We had a couple requests to talk about animation for non-animators. What is it about and how does it work? So we'll talk a little bit about that in the second hour. On Thursday, we're going to have behind the scenes. Richard Lavery finished another symposium, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about how he did that and what it took from a technical and logistical perspective. On Friday, we have Michael Camus. Michael is a expert in post-production, and specifically, he's been spending the last couple of years in post-production in the cloud. So he's going to be here talking and answering your questions about what that looks like. And then on Saturday, of course, is education. Now, our Saturday this week is a little different. We're going to have Q&A, of course, in the first hour. We always do that. But then at 8 o'clock, we're going to go back into after hours and watch the launch. We've got the OH space launch, and so we're going to be watching that. So stay tuned for that for Saturday. And then on Sunday, of course, is our more philosophical, what are we doing here and why, and the hard questions and so on and so forth. And that's not on YouTube, so you have to be in Zoom for that. All right, so that's what we have lined up for this week. Let's go ahead and jump into the questions, Bill.
Absolutely. Our first one this morning, highest rated, comes from Andy Carluccio in Washington, D.C. He said, I created an AutoHotKey actor yesterday, so now Isadora can control Google Earth, among other things. How could we incorporate a live globe into our Office Hours 2.0 graphics without being tacky?
Go ahead, Grant.
I guess it's a little bit inside baseball, but something that would be cool, I think, is to introduce the panels at the panel members at the start of the show, and it could be used then just once, where we zoom into where they are in the world as they're kind of introducing themselves. That could be fun.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
That idea goes way back. I think RKO used to have a spinning globe back in the 20s and 30s or 40s and 50s when the first little kinescopes started coming out. So I think it's just a homage. I don't think, I think you can do it and just do it, put your own spin on it, and it doesn't have to be necessarily tacky.
Well, so I think that by showing the locations or rough locations of each person, I think that I like Grant's idea. Even though we have a preamble, I try to keep that as short as we can. I probably wouldn't go through every person and introduce them, but I probably would, the first time they show up, have that globe appear. Like, so while they're talking, the first time they answer the question, you see maybe we build a super, like we have a super of them, and then we show like where they're coming in from and have it kind of zoom into that. And because it's all generated dynamically, we won't have to do a lot of setup for it. It would just happen. We just do it, which would be super cool. So I think it's great. Go ahead, Mitchell.
I was thinking you could too. You don't necessarily have to have a globe, so you can use the stretched out map version. Then you can show everything all at once.
I like the globe. I mean, because it's Google Earth. Cool. It's cool. Like it, yeah.
It's definitely cool. I'm just saying you could do it the other way too.
Yep. Yeah, I think that Google Earth looks cooler when it's in the globe form than when it's in the flat form. I think it's just the way it projects it. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Or you could do a full stats page, so you have their metahuman in one corner and then the globe coming down in a second. How many questions you've answered, how many minutes you've been on.
They're kids, like what grades they're in. Yeah, I think that would be perfect.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. All right, the next question.
Next one comes to us from Robert Soji in Los Angeles, and he says, can you use an iPhone as an HDMI monitor?
Go ahead, Danny.
Well, for the iOS, there are a handful of apps. However, those apps it needs to be paired with certain devices like cameras and whatnot. So the only solution that I came across is the HoloLens Mars X. Is basically the HDMI wireless through Wi-Fi, and then you just run the HoloView app on the iOS or Android, and then it can be used up to 3 devices. So that's the only way that you can use it as a monitor.
Yeah, I think Teradek does a similar thing to HoloLens. It has its own kind of little app that you can use as well. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
And if you have the ability to do NDI on the computer or on the camera, then you can bring it in via NDI into the phone using Sienna or the native NDI capture app.
That's great. Yeah. Next question.
Next question comes to us from John Nichols in the Bay Area. He says, what is a good multi-view setup for a mobile production? He has an ATEM Extreme with 4 cameras plus 3 computer inputs. He needs both HDMI outputs from the ATEM for the room, so he doesn't have any way to do a local multi-view.
Grant.
So I would reconsider how you're using the two outputs. In that there might be a way of using a distribution amp or something to get to so you can get that multi-view back. If you're doing some other way where you're isolating what's going out, then yeah, you might be able to take one of those feeds and send it there, and then because it's just harder to have another multi-view set up and put all of those 7 inputs into the multi-view. So it's better to use that the ATEM multi-view, because then you can have some other views as well, like the audio and the live streaming data. All of that's it's a really cool screen.
Yeah, go ahead, Peter.
To extend what Grant just said is, this is the one use where I found the streaming bridge useful, because I tend to take the direct connect Ethernet connection. I'm assuming he's going to projectors in the room, which is what he needs to do for why he needs the output. And I just use that out to use the network connection out to a streaming bridge and those into the projectors. And that gives me back all the other the multi-view back on my ATEM.
Yeah, I would definitely try to use the ATEMs. The ATEM's multi-view gives you a lot of things other than just the camera views. And so I think that you really got to figure out a way to, whatever you're putting out of both of those, you got to figure out if it's the same signal out of both, like program, then you definitely just want to split it. If it's something different, let us know in another question and we'll try to figure out how to do that. But I think you definitely one of those HDMIs. Now, the one last thing though, that won't work. Yeah, no. I had another idea, but it won't work. Next question.
Next question comes to us from Andy Kokendorfer in Viera, Florida. And he said, on ZoomISO, is there a way to search for persons or sources when trying to locate speakers in a Zoom meeting with many attendees?
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, and in our back-end system, there are a variety of brilliant people, and one of them has weighed in on this, says, yes, there are a few ways to do it, either with Isadora making a search list or with Companion following gallery. So there are some hints as to how you can start out with this.
Yeah, and we've used ZoomISO in the most simple way to just get an attendance list so that we can process that, and that all happens in real time. It's been really, ZoomISO is definitely the key, and you can absolutely see who's in it, when they came, when they left. All those things are available to you. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Robert Soji in Los Angeles. He says, what home distributed audio system, all rooms in the house, garage, and backyard, for example, do you recommend that balances cost, ease of use, durability, and decent sound quality?
Go ahead, Nigel.
Okay, so long answer. Apologize for this. You got a bunch of questions you've got to ask yourself. How many rooms do I have? How many separate zones do I want to have audio in? What are the sources? When you say outdoor, do you mean outdoor covered or not covered? And is my house wired? And those variables will really decide what the answer to the question is. But you can go anywhere from a simple Bluetooth speaker to one of those voice devices that play music in very different rooms. But if you really, really want a single system, you're going to have to start somewhere like the Sonos. And the Sonos port with a nice amp and a set of speakers is a good way to start that if the place is wired or if you can do Wi-Fi to the right places. But then it comes to a question of when you say good price and good quality sound, you might switch the Sonos amp for an audio control amp or one of those. But you've really got to start thinking more the parts and the number of sources and the number of zones you want to manage this. But simple answer is a Sonos port would be the controller to start with.
Yeah, my house came with a Sonos, and I think that the hard part that they have, and I think that may eventually be critical for them, was that they kind of burned all their Generation 1 users. So just up in the atmosphere, like they just dropped support for the hardware, and so it's really hard to dedicate time to that at this point. That's the challenge. Go ahead, Mitchell.
I'm not a fan of any wireless device, including the Sonos. It's a quick fix, and it seems like it's the best solution. But it still depends on a wireless connection, and it's not always 100%. The granddaddy of full control in your home is Crestron. It's a company that makes all types of devices that can operate in various different ways. They have wall panels, amplifiers. They do probably have some wireless connections too. And then another solution, if you want to go on the cheap side, I'm using the extended product from Geffen. And what that allows me to do is go to a central place in my room, and I send via Cat5 or Cat6 cable the digital audio to the sound system that's being adjusted, and the Geffen works just fine. And they have an analog version of it too, if you need that, that works really well for them. And then the last one on my list, and I've installed all of these systems for friends or for clients, is the BSS system, which I really like, but it's a little finicky. But they've been bought by Harman, so they have also the same thing that Crestron has. But they're audio-centric and they're brilliant sounding quality.
Yeah, go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, I was going to say the Crestron is obviously the state of the art, but it requires a lot of programming and a lot of setup. So you're buying a whole home audio, video, you're building a whole interface. If that was too expensive, then look at the Control 4 audio distribution system. But it's important to understand you've jumped now from I want a whole home audio solution to I want a complete smart home, and that's a big price jump.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the Crestron, by the way, also requires an enormous amount of swearing by the users because the buttons don't work. so like the little screens and the things and everything else. I grew up on Crestron, like so many facilities, and it's always like we can't figure out how to get one thing to work and everything else. So I would, like that's all. You just have to really. I've seen people use it really effectively. I just haven't had that experience in 30 years. So the BSS is what I'm saving up for right now. So I'm kind of putting my ducats away to get BSS system. It's an I'm getting the 806 because I want the Dante, and I also want to be able to do all the processing. So I have a lot of speakers in my house. I think 37 speakers or something like that. And so I want to be able to run. The advantage of the Crestron is that it has, or not the Crestron, the BSS is it has tons of little controllers that will tie into it. It even will let you design an iPad app like inside the system, and then you can have it run on the iPad. And then you have all the little buttons that you want, and you can say, I just want to change this to this. And you can design what it looks like inside of the BSS software. And so that is and I've seen like basically big facilities like change from 714 to 51 to whatever, just by tapping a button, and just reroutes everything to the show that you want to do. But it also has Dante, and then it also has the Blue network. So what you can do is tie the BSS using the Blue network. So you're not using up your Dante inputs or outputs. You're just using their internal to connect to all the amps and everything else. It's really slick. And I will admit, though, I'm in between because none of my Sonoses are working, and I'm trying to figure this out. So in my in-between, I find that the Apple speakers are working great. so Mitchell.
Yeah, just to add to it, make sure you have a lot of Cat5 or Cat6 cable running all over the house, because that's the future of distribution of audio and video.
Yeah, I have a lot of that. Next question.
Eric Antonio in Washington, D.C. up next with, can the panel recommend accurate studio monitors for stereo music? I have active Truth B2031As with a sub, but I'm wondering if I should upgrade prior to further mixing or EQing efforts. I'd love to stay in the $1,000 US range. Thanks.
Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, those Behringer speakers are quite good for the price, and so you could go much better. And so I've got some KRKs. They're also quite cheap, but they have a good range, as in physical size of those speakers. And I've just got the smaller ones, and they work great. But my recommendation is that you think about your audience and what they're listening on, and you have a range of speakers that you listen to. And so it was always something, as we're mixing, that we would do a bounce and then take it to the car and go for a drive and listen to it in the car, and put AirPods in and listen to it on the AirPods, and then come back to speakers and then have a couple of sets of different speakers. It's not always great to be listening on truly flat monitors. It is as a reference to start with, but then as you're mixing, you actually want to hear what the end result is for people too.
Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I go with the Mac Daddies, the Gentle X. They're just brilliant sounding monitors. I have a pair right here, and they're old ones. They've been around for 20 years, and they still work. They have never failed, never done anything to disappoint me, especially in mixing. And, to Grant's point, having a pair of speakers in here also for reference speakers for people that have bookshelf speakers, Yamaha NS10s, if you can find them, are great average sounding speakers for monitoring.
Good, Nigel.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that there's a huge difference between reference and preference here. And when you say you want reference, you have to be clear about what you're wanting the reference to. And when you get that, it's going to be what you asked for. Lots of people say they want reference, but actually want preference. And then you're going to have to go listen to the speakers and see whether that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, the Genelecs, as Mitchell said, are the kind of that's what we see the most in most studios. But the other ones that we've had for quite a bit of time is the 7 series. I think they're the 705s in our office, and the JBL 705s are very clean speakers, and so that's another thing to look at. Next question.
John Nichols out of the Bay Area is up next. He says, can ZoomOSC via Companion be used to configure the ZoomISO outputs? For example, set ZoomISO Output 1 to user full screen display 1. I see how to pin participants, but I'm not seeing how to do the initial configuration using ZoomOSC.
Go ahead, Bill.
And we have a contribution from the outside for this as well. It says, yes, the /output ISO command allows you to route participants to outputs with OSC. Details are in the documentation, so there is a path to fix your problem, and it just requires a little more work. That hopefully will send you in the right direction.
Next question.
Stefan Fischer in Würzburg, Germany says, what has to be done to stream a Zoom webinar live for YouTube? And are there any pitfalls to consider?
Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, so you can stream directly from Zoom. It's going to do a 720p stream, and that can be quite good if you have limited hardware. If you want to be doing something and you have 1080p on your webinar, that's the first thing, and you want to do it in 1080p, then you would need to do like a screen scrape that we talk about, having a computer that's dedicated, a full screen active speaker perhaps, and that then is streaming to YouTube. But you know, if you do any spotlighting or screen sharing and things like that, or you know, it goes to gallery view, and then you kind of need someone sort of operating that to keep on top of it. Otherwise, you're going to get the wrong view going out to YouTube. And then the other things to think of is the content match that happens with YouTube, and so you just want to be aware of what you're pumping in. If there's some background music or you know things that are happening there, then YouTube will pick that up quickly and shut it down. So that's a couple of things to think of.
Go, Jeffrey.
Yeah, with that you can actually schedule the YouTubes and then set it up so when you're ready to go, you just live stream. The biggest, I always find the two biggest things are the participants that play in your Zoom call, and of course how your internet is going through, and of course also the type of machine that you're using. If the machine or the internet's underpowered, then you might lose the Zoom, and then ultimately the YouTube gets cut off. And of course, if your participants decide that they want to go rogue, then you're running into different problems with YouTube and possibly getting taken down.
Go ahead, Blue.
You know, I think one of the questions was, are there any pitfalls to consider? Generally speaking, Zoom is an incredibly stable platform, but over the course of the last couple of years, just kind of looking back at messages that I get, you know, because we're subscribed to status messages like Zoom is down for this particular reason. The majority of them are trouble streaming to third-party services, trouble streaming to third-party services like YouTube and Facebook and so on and so forth. So just based on that kind of hearsay, I guess, but you know, it's just kind of my perception. We tend to not stream through Zoom whenever possible, just strictly for that reason, if nothing else.
Yeah, we've definitely had some fatal errors on a couple of days where we just couldn't stream. You know, so that's happened. I mean, we do it every day, so we have a high sample rate. But we've probably had, out of 700 and some, probably had 5 or 6 times that just didn't work. You know, and there's no way to get in. And so anyway, that's just something to think about there. The Zoom logo down at the bottom, the 720p, those are the things that kind of are a bummer for a lot of folks. And then what we do for the highest profile webinars, the nice thing about the webinar is that you can just turn it on and hit go, and 99% of the time it'll work. So not 100%, but 99% of the time it will work. The way that we do it is we usually have a Zoom meeting, and then we pull we do ISOs out of each person out of there, or with this show, we're using Zoom ISO with ZoomOSC, and we'll pull those out. The reason we do the isolated, we have a bunch of Zoom rooms that go into these and grab each person individually, and then we mix them. The downside of that is you get a little bit more latency. The upside is I have isolated audio in and out from each person, no matter how many I have, not just 3. So that's one advantage that we have there, and that we pull those out. Then we create a show. This is in our ATEM, and then we pump it back into the webinar as a single screen, and then we also send it out to YouTube. So now you have kind of a clean shot. And so the webinar, that's what we're doing here, but with ZoomISO and ZoomOSC. That's the way to. I think that the future of what we're doing will be using ZoomISO and ZoomOSC as soon as we get isolated audio from each person, where I can just set it up and I get that out. We hope that that's not too far away, but that's what we plan to do. But that way we build a whole show. We then bring it into the webinar. We build the show in. The reason that rooms are so great is because of all the breakout rooms. We don't put people into breakout rooms in a webinar, but what we do is use those breakout rooms to manage our hosts, manage green rooms, manage all kinds of other things where we can very quickly virtually move people around and get them ready for a show and then stick them into the show. And so that the meetings are incredibly powerful for that. And then we have just a single screen that comes in. Now we have all the animation that we want. We have all the other bits and pieces that we need. And we can also send a nice clean version of that out, because that means our graphics and everything else are going to be super high quality, going out to YouTube or wherever. Next question.
Next one comes from Stefan Fischer in Würzburg, Germany. He says some panelists use their Stream Deck with Companion and the original software at the same time. What are the known issues?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
My case, a known issue is it doesn't work. But in defense of Stream Deck, I'm using a beta version of Companion because that's what I need to be able to run Mix Pro effects. And it is not quite written into the Companion system yet.
You go, Jeffrey.
I've been using the original software and Companion at the same time ever since the start, because when the 32-button Stream Deck came out, you could only use the Companion 15-button Stream Deck. So I have it set up here. So basically, I have everything that I have. I have folders set up. This is all my Companion buttons right here, and this is going to the software, add the programs that I need to go to, and I can switch back forth. And I got a couple folders down here, so I go back and I can switch back to my main view right there. It works perfectly for me, and that's on a Windows system, but I have used it on a Mac the same way.
Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, so I'm on a Mac and I use the Stream Deck software and the plugin for Companion. And the reason I do it is the key thing I'm using the Stream Deck for is mute and unmute in Zoom. And I prefer to do that as a keystroke in the Stream Deck software. And that seems to work very well. And then what it means, though, I supplement that with other Companion buttons, like using the Vicron keystrokes on other machines, and so then I can unmute another machine when I have it going, as well as control my X32. And it works great. I don't think there's any problems with it.
Next question.
Zach Marley in Denton, Texas is up next. Has anyone tried out Clarity V15, I guess, from Waves? No. Yeah, anyway, from Waves for noise reduction post-processing. Sorry about my Roman numerals.
Go ahead, Jug. Sorry, Mitchell.
Yeah, I think that's VX, but Waves makes a lot of really good stuff, and they don't release El Crapo audio processing. But unfortunately, this is one instance where I usually go to Isotope. Their RX9 is really good, and I think Alex will mention that Cedar is also the winning noise reduction.
Yeah, I mean, the Synaptic Unveil is like the ultimate version of this, but it's a one-trick pony, and it just does this. And I don't know. I mean, that's what I haven't had to do it for a little while, but that's what I've used in the past. I use Isotope first, and if Isotope doesn't work, then I usually go to Unveil. But I haven't had any experience with the Clarity one. Next question.
Apologies to my high school teacher who covered Roman numerals. Elliot Robinson in Las Vegas just saw President Zelensky address U.S. Congress using WebStream. Looked great and sounded great. How does Zoom webinars compare to WebStream in terms of video and audio quality?
I don't know what WebStream is. I mean, I think they might have just said it's coming in via WebStream, and they probably was said by someone who is WebStream an actual thing? And if so, why did they use it? So there was no reason. I looked at it. I was a little distracted because I was getting ready for this. I looked at a little bit of it, and I didn't feel like, at least what we saw on the PBS NewsHour, that it was as high quality as it could have been. But I think that overall he's done a really good job at doing really good work, and making it look good. So, and that's important, it's important for leaders to have good cameras and good audio, because that gives them more authority. It makes it harder, makes it easier for them to argue their case. It's something that most of the leaders in the United States don't know how to do. So they just, not that I'm bitter, but they are, media children. And so they, like toddlers, when it comes to doing this. And I think he is a pro at it, at doing this work. And it's made it really complicated for his adversary to deal with. So, when you have someone that comes out of media that's actually also committed to what they're up to, they're pretty lethal. So, so he's done a really good job. I feel like when I saw at least this, though, I didn't feel like he did as well a job as he could. He's obviously in a bunker somewhere coming in, so I don't know what his bandwidth's like and so on and so forth. But just some of the framing and so on and so forth, I think could have been a little better. But anyway, it is important for people when they need to move other people to really have that all wrapped up. And I think overall, I think that he does a great job at it. In this specific case, he did an okay job. Which I think is a little unfortunate. Next question.
Simon Ray in Shrewsbury in the UK says, is there a free or low-cost chart that can be used to confirm the end-to-end video pipeline and whether it's 1080p or 720p? Zoom may be sending 1080, but the configuration issue might mean that the camera or other hardware is providing a lower resolution.
Yeah, what you can do is look at, there's resolution trumpets. Let's see if I can show you one. I think I have one here. It's on one of my charts. So this is a trumpet. We call these a trumpet right here. There we go. So this is a trumpet. And what it does is it starts large and gets to a very, very small resolve. And I have them going, most charts here I have them going. There's a horizontal one down here. So it can measure the horizontal and vertical resolution, because where it starts to break up or blur together, you can tell that it's breaking up. And that's a great way for you can find this chart or other charts that are resolution trumpets. A lot of them will be online. Someone's taken a screen capture or something of them. So you can, kind of cheat and use one of those. You can also buy some of these charts. This is a really expensive chart. I think it's like $1,000, but you can buy less expensive ones. You can even probably print them if you have a good enough printer to do it. But what you want to do is pull them down. They'll go down into little lines. And then what you want to do, if they're not calibrated, what you want to do is look at it through a true 1080p to know what it should be looking like. And what'll happen is that chart, if your video goes through any scaling, so if the sensor was at 720 and then it gets bumped up to 1080, that chart will fall apart almost immediately. So that's the cheapest way to figure out what your resolution actually is with the camera. Next question.
Grant Whitehead from Adelaide, Australia here in the panel says, Rogan had Mr. Beast on his podcast. Mr. Beast struggled with hearing himself in the headphones. Rogan explained it works best for not talking over each other. Has that been your experience?
Yeah, go ahead, Grant.
I was just going to add it. It was an interesting thing because Rogan specifically said when there's 3 people in his studio, they talk over each other all the time unless they're wearing cans and they have side tone, and that kind of cuts it out. And I'd never really, we talk about side tone all the time, but it was just interesting to hear that perspective, that actually hearing people, directly and hearing yourself kind of cut down the crosstalk or the over talking.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, for somebody who's done voiceover work forever, including in groups with 2 or 3 people doing a broadcast and things like that, there is a rhythm, and it's very much based on hearing not only yourself back, but the conversation, hearing everything as you would in a conversation with 3 of your friends, because there are natural little micro pauses and things like that. And sometimes it's just, it's mystical to me, because sometimes I run across somebody and I'm having a conversation with them and we just seem out of sync. We both try to talk at the same time and we both pull back at the same time. And I can never tell why it's going to happen, but there's a lot of human interaction in these conversations to make them natural.
I think the technical thing here is that if you have headphones on both sides, on both ears, then you can't really hear the other people as well. And so it's a little harder for you to identify location and who's talking and everything else. When you have a single in-ear, which is not what Rogan uses, Rogan tends to give people, cans. So if you have a single ear, it probably wouldn't affect you the same way, because you wouldn't need the side tone, because you can faithfully hear with one ear. But I think that the real problem with the show, and he has his own model for what he's doing, but if you put cans on people and they don't have side tone, they will absolutely talk over each other more. Like that's kind of a very known, for me anyway, for podcasting. We've had ones where we have people all around. We found out that we had to give them side tone, because we'd have 6 people on a round table and have, aisles to them and everything else. And if they didn't have one open ear, they would absolutely talk over each other constantly. And as soon as, so if you have closed headsets without side tone, because you just can't hear people as well. And so you can't, to what Bill's saying, there's little cues that people are giving you that you won't hear if that they want to talk if you have headphones on without side tone. Next question.
Sean Johnson in New York comes up next. He says, hi, all. When using a Blackmagic web presenter, the original version, as a camera in Zoom on a Mac, the embedded audio is low and the volume slider in Zoom is grayed out, or is movable but snaps back all the way down. Any ideas? Thanks.
Grant.
Yeah, so I do this. I bring a web presenter into Zoom often for a green room feed. So I bring program of our show back into a green room, and I find the same thing. So I think it's because it's a digital input, the audio, that Zoom can't control the level of it. And so one way around that is loop back. So I do this for 2 reasons. I do loop back so that I can drop it to about 30%. So now the program audio is coming into that Zoom meeting at a 30% level, so people can talk over the top of it quite comfortably. And so that's one way. If the fact that it's low suggests that your upstream is going into the web presenter is low. So your embedded audio in your whole program out is at a lower level. And so while you could do some things like audio hijack, and you could use some plugins, and you could kind of do a whole hacking way around to bump up the gain, I would start with upstream, looking at how you're getting your audio in, and try to be having that sitting closer to, kind of that -12, up to -6 kind of level, and then you'll be happy everywhere.
Next question.
Fleety in Bali, Indonesia is up next. Can anyone offer advice on conditions to either include or watch out for when negotiating smaller gigs with government departments?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
This is really going to depend on the government that you're going through, if it's state or federal, and of course where you're located. There's many different pitfalls that could happen there, because they have to watch out, because anything that they approve of, if something happens and they find out that you subcontracted to this group that's on their do not use list, then you can get in a lot of trouble. They can get in a lot of trouble. And then of course there's a lot of committees that are probably going over your proposals and making sure that you become an approved vendor for government work. So, and a little bit of, in some cases, especially if you're talking in the financial areas, you might have to go through some security checks, and that can take a little bit more time. So give yourself some headway, put all your ducks in a row, and you should be good.
Go ahead, Bill.
This is so variable and so hard to tell in advance. I've had government gigs where it was really informal and everything was easy and we could make adjustments. And then I've had government gigs where literally everything was so competitively bid and structured and regulated that if it wasn't in the original contract, you couldn't bring it back up. There's just a huge variety of that. I did a ton of voiceover work for the Bureau of Land Management for a lot of time, and it was great because I started early enough in the process, and I watched their process evolve, and it got easier as I went along, to the point where they would even just give me a credit card to do voiceovers and things like that. It was the opposite of bureaucratic, but as I said, I've also done gigs where it was utterly bureaucratic. You never can tell. You just have to ride with whatever is presented to you.
And Nigel?
Minor point, because all that's great advice. Be careful of free. When you think you're giving something away that somebody there thinks they have value, you start to move into very difficult territories. So be fairly transparent with your pricing. Don't offer any gifts or things that could be assumed to be gifts or anything. You go wrong really fast when you try that.
Yeah, and the other thing you want to know is what almost all government agencies have, as Bill was kind of alluding to, have a threshold. So the threshold is a certain number that they can just put on their credit card. When you go over that threshold, that means it has to be triple bid, or there's a whole bunch of other red tape that happens. Usually that threshold for most governments, in my experience, is somewhere in the ballpark of $2,000. so like if you have if your events break into multiple products that end up being $1,900 or $1,800, and they and you have a couple different things, like the preparation might be $1,800, but the event might be, you would normally might combine those, but you might want to think about separating them, and then those things can be paid as separate pieces, and that happens very quickly. Whereas when you do billing, the other thing you have to know with government is, I don't know about your government, but with our government, it's a long play. We expect 120 to 180 day payment terms. So that's what you have to kind of plan for, as opposed to if you get into a larger event. And it's the reason that's important is that's why all these large companies have these large contracts, is because they can shoulder what's required of the working with the government, and manage that. Being able to handle long terms is really something that gives you scale. You can take on much larger projects, and more lucrative projects if you can be patient. So you have to kind of think through that as well, because haranguing a government person at 35 days will not get you more projects. Next question.
Zach Marley in Denton, Texas says, I've been having some audio hum issues that have been solved by switching from quad mic cabling to standard. I can't make sense of this solution. Any thoughts?
Mitchell?
Well, you're not saying, Zach, whether or not you're using a microphone level or a line level and what you're plugging into and out of, but it sounds very much like you have a wiring problem on your quad cable, because there's 4 wires, not 3 wires. And with a quad cable, you got to make sure that you have the red center wire plugged into the pin 2 hot, and then the ground 1, and then the low side on 3. And sometimes it's you can do a quick fix by floating the ground on one end of the cable, usually the end of the source, not the beginning of the source. But you got a wiring issue there you need to work out.
Good, Bill.
Yeah, and this is balanced audio versus unbalanced, probably. And in balanced audio connections, you need all three of the legs.
They're all balanced. I mean, the quad cable, he's talking about a star quad, I'm sure.
No, I'm just saying that if the wiring on either the source end or the receiving end doesn't accept balance and do that phase inversion, it's not going to work, and you can get hum in them. It becomes unbalanced just by the fact of the wiring, no matter what cabling you use.
Yeah, I think it's definitely the connector. It's how you're connected to the connectors in the quad cable. The cable's probably fine, but it's the connectors that are, or the cable is mashed somewhere. But it's either the cable's like visibly damaged, or there's something wrong with the way it's being connected to the termination. Next question.
Moving to Dot Davis in Hutchinson, Kansas. Are the panelists for or against the Sunshine Protection Act, which is trying to make daylight savings time permanent in the U.S.?
Grant?
I'm very supportive of times not changing. I give you a good example. We used a system called Simply Book Me, is a website that is kind of a booking system, and so we had 130 presentations to pre-record, and so we had all these people pre-record, And it was over the time that daylight saving was changing in different countries, which of course happens at different times. And the system didn't support it at all. Didn't support daylight saving. So of course, all of the bookings were totally wrong. So they were all out. And so that was last year. This year we moved to Calendly, and Calendly does support daylight saving, and it knows when someone makes a booking before daylight saving changes, it accommodates it. And so that was good. But let me just say, I don't want just no daylight saving. I want the whole world to run on UTC. Let's just everyone change your clock to UTC, and now everyone, there's no time zone conversion. You just know that everyone's working on the same clock. That's my deal.
100% behind that. Jeffrey?
Yeah, that'd be tough to at first get a handle on, but I think we could definitely really work from there. For me, usually this time of year was when I was at South by Southwest, and I remember Sunday was always a day of confusion because events would get shifted around. I remember one year I was going on a plane the next day, and their plane system actually crashed because they had the DST conversion messed everything up. So I'm all for it. The only thing is the bi-yearly complaint. We're going to have to figure out something new to complain about it twice a year.
Exactly, Bill.
This is religious for me. I grew up and spent most of my career in Arizona. We never had to deal with this. And I always looked at the rest of the world and went, this is insanely crazy. To me, this is the equivalent of taking all your rulers and cutting off the first inch and putting it in the back end. It makes absolutely no sense at all to me. It never has. And I would hope they can just eliminate the whole idea of daylight saving time. Don't make it permanent. Go back to regular time and make sure that each 7 o'clock comes 12 hours after the original 7 o'clock, always without change.
Mitchell?
Yeah, in the beginning, it was a VCR. It is blinking. Now they're messing with my, TV, my power, my range, my microwave. Just leave it one place. Can I set it once and then I'm okay? But I agree with everybody that says get rid of it.
I don't care. Yeah, I don't care which way they go as long as they stop doing it. I care a little. I think daylight savings is better because it gives us more time in the evening, and they will talk about kids going to school in the dark or whatever. That's like a little argument. But to the kids, we should ask the kids whether they'd rather go to school in the dark and have more time after school to be outside, or whether they'd rather have light when they went to school and then have it be dark when they get home. I think if we let the kids vote, they'd all vote for light when it matters, which is when not at school. Yeah, go ahead, Ron.
But so change the time. Change the time of school. Don't change everyone's clocks, right? So then, you can say now school starts.
But I don't want to do that to the poor.
a.m.
I don't want to do that to the poor kids either. They should be getting more time outside after school. We should. Like if I was a kid and they moved school to adjust for that, I'd be like, what? I want my time back. It was always for me, it was always whatever school did. School was not allowed to encroach on the time that once I left school was over. Because I did all my homework during the classes. And so, which I'm a little annoyed with because my kids aren't allowed to do that. So, but I would do all my homework from the last class in the current class. And so when I left school, I didn't think about it again until I showed up again in the morning, the next day. And so I would have loved to have an extra hour in the evening to do whatever I was doing. I was, and I think that it's, yeah, I do agree that I would rather just do UTC, and you'll see office hours move more and more to where we're not really supporting local. I mean, I know it's been Pacific time for a long time. We're doing it slowly. You'll see a double in some places, but by the end of this year, we'll only be all times in office hours will be UTC. so we don't have to think about it anymore. And we're a global organization. There's no reason for us to be thinking about time zones. But I will say this is, since I was 10 years old, I just thought this is the dumbest thing ever. And so and I've been angry. I think that, again, there will be a Twitter storm that I don't think that people can, there's a lot of people on Twitter that will attack, if they get this far and don't pass it, I don't even think if Biden vetoes it, I don't even think he should run. I don't even think, I think if he vetoes this, he should not run for another thing, because there's no way he can win. If you veto, I mean, there's a lot of important things in the United States, but if you veto daylight savings time, there's a lot of people that will vote against you just for that. Next question.
Eduardo Augustine in Panama says how to add thin, neat borders in SuperSources like the one in Office Hours 2.0. Can this be done from the ATEM Mini Extreme?
Go ahead, Blue.
Yeah, you can, and the SuperSource system in the ATEMs does support a border, but it looks like it's something that was done probably in like 1985 approximately. So you're probably going to want to use artwork that has a transparent layer and put your video sources behind it. Or you can go the other route, which is just to use artwork and put your video sources in front of it, but essentially have a graphic that you upload as art that includes the borders, and then position your video boxes within those frames.
Yeah, we are using the border, which is just a single line that goes around it. But I think that I agree with Blue that I think that the way to do this, I want to put curved edges. As soon as you want to do curves, so I want to put little curved edges like we have here in Zoom, and I want to make the borders look a little bit nicer. And as soon as we go to that, it's going to be artwork with video behind it. And so that's somewhere in our future. Next question.
Jamie Walsh in Tallahassee, Florida. Is there a way in Zoom to tell a speaker how much time they have left without showing the timer for everyone in the call?
Go ahead, Grant.
Yes, so we use a system called stagetimer.io. Absolutely love it. The developer is just an absolute gun. He has a development card system where he has like his whole to-do list is public, and so all the feature requests, how many people have requested the feature and when it's happening. Anyway, stagetimer.io. So all you could do is you can set your timer up, and then you could send the speaker the link, and they could just open it up on their phone or an iPad or some other device, or even just a window on their computer, and now it's completely hidden away from Zoom. But is giving the direction to the speaker. So I think that could work.
That's great. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. He says that one often quoted reason for using tracks for the Super Bowl halftime show is the time it takes to sound check an act with a large input count. Would it help to pare down the inputs, or is it a function of the complexity of modern music production?
It's a function of the complexity of modern music production. I mean, if you look at the size of these events, there is no way that they would have less than 50 to 100 inputs. So, and probably it would be, if they, like, if you just look at the last one and you look at how many people are singing, and then remember that a drum kit is like 12 mics, and there's lots of these inputs, you end up with just an enormous amount of inputs, and anything over like a basic band with 4 inputs would be too much. You have to also remember they're setting up in minutes. So it's just, it is not stable, to do that. I wouldn't do it even if I had 3 musicians up there with a mic, with 1 mic each. I wouldn't even try to do it live. Not for that many people in that amount of setup time. No way. Go ahead, Bill.
I was just going to note, I mentioned it before, but there's a behind the scenes on YouTube of the weekend's halftime show, and the behind the scenes look through their production of that is amazing, including how many restrictions there are. I think working to tracks is absolute requirement, because you just want to reduce every possible variable. That is such a monstrously huge endeavor. Plus, they have no time to do it. And I was surprised to find out from watching that they can't even rehearse on the field for like days ahead of it, because the grounds crew will not let anybody walk on the field ahead of the game. So you can't even like rehearse a band or whatever. It's crazy rigid and structured.
Yep. Next question.
Next one comes from Nick Ball in the UK. Do you think VMIX will ever be able to port to M1 silicon?
Go ahead, John.
I am skeptical, because it runs so well on Windows that moving it over to Mac now, I think, would be a very difficult uphill battle for them.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I totally agree. But, the reality is anything is possible. And once we start seeing performance of parallels, it wouldn't be my choice to do VMIX on a Mac using Parallels, or even if Boot Camp becomes something where you can get Windows onto an M1 Mac. But it would be interesting if they decided to make an M1 version native to the M1 Mac. But there is no plans as of yet.
People are having trouble getting the Mac apps to run on the Mac. So I think that on the M1. So I think that getting a PC which will work on there is very unlikely. So I don't think that VMIX will probably ever make it over there. And I think that's going to be more problematic. I mean, I think that when you look at live video and the opportunities for Mimo Live and even OBS and other ones to do really well on the Mac is going to be the cost of what you're buying for what you're getting. There's going to be a huge GPU performance, which is really where a lot of us real-time video graphics and cutting and everything else is really GPU intensive. And if we have a Mac solution that will solve that, it's going to be pretty interesting. So, because with 128 gigs of VRAM, you could do a lot of live video. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. By the way, I don't know if anyone saw, we didn't mention this, but Logic now has, a lot of new preview. I think it might have gone by yesterday, but so a lot of being able to play through and preview into surround is I think in the newest update. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next again, and in this case, he says, in a French language document from the state of Illinois agency, the document writes times with an H between the hour and the minute, as in 08HOO. Why could that be?
I think that Dennis put it in there, but it's just used as a separator. So instead of having colons, you have a separator, and you have H as the separator, just to kind of separate the hours from the minutes. One of the things for us is that we've used when we try to skip colons is that colons cause trouble in our programming. So it's nice to have something that is a letter instead of a symbol that separates those things out. Next question.
Next question comes for us from Peter Moore in Auckland, New Zealand. He says, a while ago there was a fire that affected some audio chips. Now with the Ukrainian war, valves and tubes are in short supply due to sanctions of them being made in Russia. Slovakia, JJ Electronics is the only quality supplier left. Thoughts on that?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Well, audio tubes and vacuum tubes, there's a certain kind of sound associated with them. It's mainly a warmth and how it handles different harmonics. It's a fringe thing in the beginning. So if the supply goes down for a while, I think we'll have to learn to live with transistors and integrated circuits and all those boring stuff.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, the biggest area that's going to be affected is any musician that really wants to have a tube amp over a transistor in their amplifiers. And I've already seen messages of people saying, "Hey, grab up all the tubes you can right now because they might be in short supply in a few months." Especially since we're getting in the summer months when playing is more regular than not. So that's where it's going to really get affected.
Yeah, I will say this is how. Industries die is, some kind of strike to it. And suddenly, everybody finds another way to do it, or they decide it's close enough. And, so it'll be interesting depending on how long this, I think a couple weeks or a couple months is probably not going to impact it. But if it stays out of commission for a year, there'll be more simulators. It basically builds up an ecosystem. It's like a giant tree that falls in the forest, and suddenly a whole bunch of other stuff grows up where that shade was. And I think that, that's what happens a lot of times. Let's keep moving. Next question.
Next one comes from Douglas Carmichael, and he says, I've been thinking seriously about a Behringer wing as my hub of my studio when the SoundGrid card is released. Would there be any risk of brand stigma from clients with the use of a Behringer product in a critical role?
Go ahead, Grant.
Maybe years ago, the Behringer had a bit of a bad name, and then they bought Midas, and everyone was like, hang on. Didn't Midas buy Behringer? I was like, no, Behringer bought Midas, and it was like, oh, okay, so this has changed it. And then they started putting all this Midas preamps and kind of that tech inside the Behringer stuff. And there's some Clark Technic stuff in the wing as well. And so if you've got a client who even knows what Behringer is, the chances are they're going to know that there's some high quality components in that. And they're probably not going to care what you're using as long as you can output a good sound.
Yeah, it was amazing the difference between when before and after Midas. It brought out an engineering team, attention to detail, a lot of other things, and so I think that stigma has long since gone that of what used to be there. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Albie in San Antonio, and Albie says, what portable key lights are recommended when filming a talking head scene, similar to the Aperture AMRAM Cobb 60X, but are currently out of stock?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
You didn't mention what you wanted to spend, but personally, I'm using a key light from Light Panels, and they were the inventors of LED lights. The one I'm using is the Astra Soft. And it is portable. It is battery operated if you want it to be. And it's big enough because you need size to really make a difference to get that wrap. Of course, can't tell because I'm wearing a hat today, but that's my favorite.
Yeah, for portable ones, trying to find something with a Bowens mount, like some kind of Fresnel with a Bowens mount that you can put a giant chimera, however you want to say it, in front of it, because what's nice about that is that folds up into something small and then comes out and is much larger. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Well, I was just going to say, you mentioned that, and I think that's an excellent process, taking a single source light and putting it in a bag or a softbox, as we colloquially call them. It gives you a beautiful, soft wrap light. I've been surprised. One thing, Bowens themselves had all sorts of financial trouble and kind of went out of business, but the Bowens mount has really had a resurgence, and I think it's going to last now for quite a long time in their new forms. So it's very flexible. It's a little ring system that you can clip modifiers on, and if you're looking for a light that has that focusable capability, going with a Bowens mount, I think, will stand you in really good stead for a long time to come.
Yeah, it's the other thing to look at is there's a lot of LEDs that are on fabric that literally pop up to it, and so that they roll right up. And we've done a lot of interviews with them. They're nice and quiet. They're very easy to pack. But some of the good ones are really expensive. The nice thing is their ballast is somewhere different, so we can move the thing that does the power away from the light, and the light itself is very, very light. And so that's another one to kind of look at is these different light pads, that are again, our favorite one is one that rolls out to about a 4x4, 4 feet by 4 feet. It's just an incredible key light. It's super big and super soft, and you put a diffuser in front of it. And it works. And that went from being something that was kind of on the outer edge of what people do to kind of mainstream. So, yeah, our little system on the back end didn't show the animation. For some reason, our system, there's a bunch of animation ones, but it's not listed. So I misunderstood how many questions we had. So we're running a little early. Oh, we got a couple first more. Go ahead. Next, I think we have one more first hour.
Let's see. Oh, there it is. Is there a cure for GAS, which is an acronym for Gear Acquisition Syndrome, which we all, I think, suffer from more or less? That's looking out to buy the latest thing.
I think that the first step is admitting that you have a problem, and none of us here have been willing to admit that yet. So I think we're still in the first step.
12 steps may not be enough.
Yeah, exactly. It might not be enough for us. Yeah. So anyway, so let's go ahead and we're now changing subjects, and we are going to discuss animation. And this is a request. I don't know exactly where we're going to go with it. We'll have a couple of us talk about little bits and pieces of what makes sense. But I think that it is useful. And this is really, we'll definitely talk about, we'll chat about animation as much as we can in 1 hour. The main thing is to just talk about some of the basics of understanding what's important, because I think that a lot of people haven't done that. They're just cutting, or they're just putting things together, and they don't understand keyframing and so on and so forth. So I figured we'd discuss it here. So if you have questions, basic questions about animation, let us know. And go ahead. We'll open it up to the panel for some discussion first. Go ahead, Jeffrey. Was Jeffrey here? Jeffrey's gone. Yeah, there he is.
Oh, no, that raised my hand on the last question. I don't know how that got on there.
Okay, Bill.
But sorry.
So I got into a little bit of basic animation with a program about the time that Macromite Director was coming up called VideoWorks. It was kind of a precursor to Director. And I realized a huge amount of appreciation for the people who do animation before these tools all developed that made it so much easier. This goes back to the kind of Disney cell animation where you're drawing individual frames with tiny, tiny changes between them to make things look like live motion. And VideoWorks was a real brain opener for me, just understanding how you could set up characters. They started getting into very rudimentary in-betweening, which is one of the keys, so that you don't have to literally draw every change in an animated series. And it's one of those things that if you're trying to explain things, having control over being able to break down things in steps and make whatever you want to happen can be a very powerful thing. So I just think even if you're just kind of thinking about it a little bit, it is an easier industry to learn the rudiments of, and the equipment that we have on our desktop now is so powerful compared to what was available back in those days when I was starting to play around with it. I still don't have the patience nor the artistic skill to animate a lot of things, but just being aware of what's out there has made it hugely more powerful for me, particularly as a video editor, in understanding what I can do in terms of changing a thing from this to that over time. And that works with transitions and a whole bunch of other pieces of the language of video communication. I think everybody should spend a little time in animation learning how it functions.
And go ahead, Jeffrey.
So I did do one animation that actually got onto, believe it or not, Tech TV. I did something in CorelDRAW, and it was frame by frame. It was a parody movie trailer, and it was a lot of fun, but it was a lot of work. And I drew every single frame. Well, minus certain things, like for instance, if a hand was moving or something like that, I would just draw the hand, and then of course do frame by frame, moving it across the screen and stuff like that. Back then it was it was on a PC that was a Pentium 2 or something like that. And so it took hours upon hours just to do a 30-second thing or 90-second thing, and go from there. And that's when I realized that was not what I really wanted to do. But what I like nowadays is things like Character Animator, where you can actually have things going. We did my MetaHuman a couple weeks ago, and I was really impressed on how easy it was to build something and put it into a space that I could move it around really quickly.
Sorry, I was going to all right. Anyway, we'll leave it here. I about to show something in motion. I looked down and I realized I just swapped computers and one had a dock on, and I can't remember how to make the dock just disappear. Anyway, I don't do it. I use the first thing I do when I open a computer is get rid of the dock on a Mac. So anyway, we'll take a look at it. I'm going to show you a couple things before we jump into the questions. So one of the things that, there's some basics of how we do it, and a lot of what was discussed here. Sometimes there is animation where you are literally moving every single frame. I'm sorry, I'm a little discombobulated here. I missing my pen, which will be very hard. There we go. So what happens is you can basically animate every single frame. There's a problem. The real problem with that, as we start thinking about animation, is that that you can't do it smoothly. It's very hard to do it smoothly. You see, it is incredible when you watch stop motion animation of someone actually being able to see the speed and difference and so on and so forth. And so what we do is we lay out what we call keyframes. So we have a keyframe here, and then we might, and then we have a series of frames, and then we have a keyframe here. And what we want to do is say, I need you to be here, and then I need you to be here at this time, and then it will find its way there, and you're basically setting. I want you to go here to here or here to here. Now, there's a lot more to it. Let's take a look at what that keyframing actually looks like. So if I cut to this, so this is in motion. I just figured this would be the easiest one for me to kind of jump into and have you take a look at it. So I've got this square here, and what I want to do is I want to animate it over here. So what I can do is I'll go into its inspector, and I'll go to its properties, and I will go to its position, and I'll lay a keyframe. So that's me laying down a keyframe there, and I will go 60 frames over, and I'm going to lay another keyframe, and I'm going to move it over here. Now you can see that little line. That little line is telling us where it's going. So it's going to go from here to here. Now, what we're looking at, what you see down here, this is what we call the F curve. So this is the function curve. And what that means is this is a function of basically position over time. And so if we go ahead and hit, and the nice thing about motion is that it does things nice and in real time. So we'll move this over here like this. We'll let it stop for a frame and then go forward. So anyway, so we have, and you can see as I move it, it's already figured that piece out. Now you'll notice that this isn't perfectly straight. That means there's just a little bit of an ease in and ease out that motion tends to add to those kinds of things. And you have to be kind of aware, of that. So if I hit the space bar, you'll see that it's now animated from there. Now, some of the things that I can do is I can take this, and this is our let's just move our parameter. I held down the shift key. Notice how it slows down as it gets there. So this is what we call an ease out. And this is a Bezier curve controller. So this is just like the same controller that you'd have in Illustrator or Photoshop, but it's controlling, again, a function curve. So what it's controlling is literally a curve that describes how much I'm going to go over. So here I'm going faster. So and then here I slow down. So I'm not moving as much in space as I am in time. I can do this on this end too, like that. And you'll see that it's got kind of it starts slowly, and that gives it more weight, and now we can keep on doing this. So this gives you a lot of control. See how now it's like, and so all these little things there, and I animate almost everything with, I will admit, I am very old school. I animate most of my things with function curves because I understand what I'm looking at here. Looking at other things can be a little bit difficult. Now, right now we're doing Y. You can see that I have, we're just doing X, but we could position Y. Now you can also grab onto these curves and move them here. But so for instance, I could, at any point in time, I could do this. I could grab this one here, and I will go back to the rectangle, and I will go in. I can look at its position again in X, Y, and Z. I could theoretically grab onto, put a keyframe here. Now, what's interesting about this is if I put a keyframe here and I move it up, there we go. So now you can start to see its movement there. And because what happened was I set the keyframe for all of these, so it already has its Y keyframe there. And so now you can see it here, and now it's going to go up. So this is a lot, obviously this is what you want to, the most important thing when you think about animation is, number one is those keyframes and where you're going to put those. As well as, how you're going to deal with how you get to those keyframes. And so now you can see that I'm directly affecting the Y just by moving the F curve itself. And then the thing to realize is that now as you start to work on these animations, that essentially once you see these keyframes here, you can see that everything has these. So every variable that you're looking at here now has a keyframeable output. And now you can put those together. Now this is what we would really consider direct animation. You can also do indirect or basically a lot of the things that motion does. For instance, if I add let's see if I add a background. Let's see here. Basically, some of these generators. Now these are going to be automatic. Things that are there. So you can add if you have replicators, for instance, that are doing these are calculations, so these aren't being animated specifically. So let's grab this and we'll put it here, and you can see this being drawn out. So this is all being revealed. And again, this one I don't think has it has animations. I think that it's actually let's grab onto this here. A lot of these are things that are procedural. So you basically set up a bunch of rules and they actually do them on their own. So we can do it by hand, like we see here, but we can also do it by through procedural stuff where we're setting up a bunch of rules. And the advantage of setting those rules up is that can do much more complex things. When you look at particle systems, that are doing these things. They're handling thousands of objects all at one time, as opposed to one. So when one matters, you animate that one. When thousands of them matter, you figure out how to replicate them and to move them around. So hopefully that's kind of the beginning of this discussion. Then we'll start answering some questions. So if you've got questions about animation, I'm just showing the most basic things, but this is kind of the beginning of that. So let's go ahead into the first question.
First one comes to us from Jamie Walsh in Tallahassee, Florida. He says, is there a preferred tool for doing simple animations, rotating logos or web pages?
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, when I use these dedicated animation programs are rich and big, but I tend to use just my NLE. Most NLEs have rudimentary animations built into them. And in actuality, Final Cut, which I use, has a subset of motion, which Alex is using in it. So I find the ability not to have to leave and go to a second program to do simple animations is really useful. And I would check some of the other programs you have and look for keyframes. If it allows keyframes, that's the central enabling technology, as Alex has demonstrated, to allow you to move whole objects over time and move things into view or out of view and swing them across a screen and things like that. So if you have keyframes, don't discount other programs outside of dedicated motion graphics programs for doing simple animations.
Yeah, I think that what I would say is that that it is motion is probably the least expensive one on the Mac. So it depends on whether you're on a Mac or PC. Motion is going to be the least expensive. It's $50, and you have 3D animation skills. You have all kinds of stuff that you can just simply move. And so it's one of the things that I would highly recommend. As far as simple ones go, again, for $50, it'll do a lot. So you can get a lot done inside of Motion if you're on the Mac. On the PC, you can use things like Blender. So Blender is a free application, and that's on Mac and PC. So as far as rotating things in 3D space, Blender is a relatively good application for that type of thing. It's a little bit more complicated than what you have there. I don't know if it's still out there or not. I haven't used it in a couple of years, but the 3D Invigorator, this is by Zaxworks, and if it's still out there, it is probably one of the best logo animation tools. So if you're just doing logos, it's one of the most advanced animation tools for logos and 3D text. You can bring an Illustrator in, extrude it out to a bunch of different things, and then animate it. And it was literally designed only for logo animations. And very intuitive and very easy to use. And I've been using mostly Motion for a lot of my stuff recently, so I haven't used it as much, but I used to use it a lot, and it used to be used by a lot of broadcast. If you're looking for the broadcast solution, the vast majority of broadcasters that we know are using Cinema 4D. So that's become kind of the standard for 3D animations. And then of course, After Effects for 2D and 3D-ish animations. After Effects is another standard that's being used. So go ahead, Bill.
Well, I just want to say Alex's comment that Motion for $50 is a powerful program. That may be the biggest understatement said on the shows. Wow. Motion is incredibly deep and incredibly fully featured. I mean, for $49.95 or whatever the price of this thing is, you can spend 10 years just deep in Motion and not come anywhere close to mastering all its capabilities. That shouldn't cause you to think that these programs are all hard, and you can get things done simply, and you can also buy libraries of things and then start to deconstruct them and understand how people who are really good at this do that, and that can help you get into these programs. But it's not trivial. A program like Motion, don't think that just because it's only $50, it's not very sophisticated, because that's the opposite of the truth.
Yeah, it's very sophisticated. It's kind of an amazing app for the price. It's just and there's so many things that if I only did this one thing, it'd be worth $50. And so the number one thing I use it for our shows is countdown clocks in 3D, and I do 3D letters and all these really fun things. And Motion is the clients are impressed with what I do, and it literally takes me minutes to put these things together. And if all it did, if they changed its price to countdown clock, tool and took away most of the features. I still pay $50 for it. So anyway, so it's a really, really powerful app. Next question.
Timo Gallegos in Austin, Texas is up next. And he says, are there any software programs available that make animation easier for the novice to get started? If so, could you list a few?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Absolutely. There's many different ones. There's some that are free. There's some that are used, and it really depends on how you're using it. For instance, for live streaming, we're using here SPXGC, which is absolutely free, and you'll be able to do simple things like lower thirds and tickers and stuff like that. But Tuomo has some add-on packages that you'll be able to add in social things and bugs and all that other stuff. I also use NewBlueFX when it comes to putting in graphics because they have some nice templates, and I can do the keyframe setup like Alex was showing before to set up different types of things right there. But another thing that I've done is that I've actually bought a few templates from some of these third-party vendors, because then I can get all the files, I can put it into the program that I'm going to be using for learning how to break it apart, and then see how they set it up, how it works. Turn off one of the functionalities and see what happens to the graphic as it's playing forward, and just basically get in and move things around and go from there.
Yeah, to the templates, to go back to using, there's a lot of those. So like for 3D, one of the great templates and setups and surfaces and everything else is Gray Gorilla. So Gray Gorilla for Cinema 4D is a great set of templates if you want things to look just really amazing without having to know how to do all of those things. For motion, there's Motion VFX, and this is for motion and Resolve. Or Final Cut and Resolve. Motion VFX is they basically make hundreds of templates that are out there, and they are very detailed. And if you have motion, you can open them up and dig into them. So I want to turn, as Jeffrey said, I can go in. It's not just a pre-built thing. It is pre-built, like you can just throw things onto it and it'll look pretty, but it also is a project. So you can go in there and learn. You can also learn what they did. Like, oh, I see how they did that, how they animated it, and they do a lot. That's really, really powerful. You can make things look really refined, really fast. Next question.
Vincent Alvarez in Bellingham, Washington says, basic question, please explain what a sprite is. I've heard office hours use the terminology before, but I don't know what it is.
I feel like Obi-Wan Kenobi. That isn't a name I've heard in a very long time. so anyway, go ahead, Bill.
Well, I've always taken it as the fundamental basic thing you can put on a screen that you're going to put into motion. So a sprite might be, and then this is the hard thing of defining it. It could be something like you have a face of somebody and you're going to animate their mustache. In animating the mustache becomes the sprite that you are working with. It's not the whole thing, and you can have multiple sprites in a scene, but whatever you're targeting at the core level and working on to animate, I think that is a sprite in a world of sprites.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I remember creating my first sprite on a Commodore 64. It was a little balloon that crossed across the screen. So this is basically going bit by bit and drawing that item, and then being able to utilize that within whatever program or video that you're using it in.
It's kind of a generic term like a crayon. It's not one thing, it's a class of things.
Well, and typically sprites have been, a small graphic element. Like literally when we look at it, it's just you're going to animate a sprite, but it doesn't need to be animated. It can just be a sprite is a small graphic element that we might use as a layer. So typically in games, in the old games, those little layers were used, and there's lots of sprites because that's what they were animating. This was largely before the 3D, when you're in a 3D environment. So these were little 2D pieces that would run like Mario. So next question.
Let's see. Dave Troutman in Edmonton, California says, Edmonton, Canada, sorry about that. Was Flash your introduction to animation, or were panel members using something before that with computers?
My introduction to animation, well, typically, actually was stop motion, with literally old video cards. It was just an amazing thing in the 80s of just just trying to do that. My actually first animation was in AutoCAD of all things. I'm sorry, VersaCAD, which had a 3D animation, and you could. It was very very rudimentary. It was for like, and this was in the late '80s. So that was the very first thing that I learned how to animate. And then after that, for me, it was my next thing that I learned how to animate in was After Effects. After Effects and Electric Image in the early '90s is when I really started to do some basic animations there. I guess I did a couple in HyperCard using sprites, so I, which I drew from scratch. Like Jeffrey said, like it was, and these were literally 32 by 32 icons that I wanted to animate. And so inside of a 32 by 32 square, I would create these little animations of things that I wanted to do. And it took an enormous amount of time, and it was a lot of fun, though. I mean, I had the Geffen logo rotating, and if you think that it's easy to do the Geffen, then just wait until you have to do it 32-bit sprites or 32 by 32 sprites. Anyway, so we did some of those. That's how I get started, and then those were my After Effects and Electric Image were probably my primary animation apps for a decade until I moved to other things like Cinema 4D and eventually Motion. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, Flash was a kind of the environment. I think that's the best way to think. It isn't really a language. It was the first developmental little platform that allowed most of us to get in there and play around. The downfall of Flash was that while it spread wide, it was a monstrous resource hog. So it was horribly inefficient in terms of code. So the reason that I think Flash, well, it was proprietary and that was one thing, but it just got weighty. And I remember Steve Jobs officially saying we weren't going to put it on the Mac. We're going to go away from Flash just because it eats up so much resources that we can't do the other things we want to do in computer programming because this sidecar big world over here is eating up all of our processor time.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I was pre-Flash, and of course with the VIC-20 and like I said, the Commodore 64, I did the balloon across the screen. When my VIC-20, I was doing animations. It was a fun animation where the guy was climbing up a wall, avoiding flower pots and stuff like that. But even with sprites, I still do it today with that Davoom right there, right behind me, because that's just a little animated pixel board that's 16 by 16, and I could put my logo and different text on there and scrolling graphics and everything like that.
Next question.
Roy Myers in Bel Air, Maryland is up next. He says, are the principles the same in Resolve to move blocks of video to fly in? For example, animating the building of a SuperSource of 6 running videos, then moving each one to full screen for a few seconds.
Yeah, it's all the same. Yeah, so you would absolutely do the same thing. It's different, a slightly different set of tools, tools that I'm less capable of in Resolve than I am in Motion. So I'm not going to try to show them to you, but that is exactly what you would do, whether it's in Final Cut or Resolve or Motion or After Effects or whatever. It is all the same in the sense that you're saying, I want to start from here. I want to get to there. I'm going to now control the speed using the F curve or something else so that I can have ease in, ease outs as much as you want. The other thing you start to think about is weight. So as a lot of times people will animate something from here to here, but if it was heavy and it had momentum, it might go past and then back. So a lot of times we'll put like a little hiccup. So it'll, if you want to have something, go really fast, you could have it zing overshoot where it needs to be, and then fall back to where it wants to go. And so it gives it a wow. It's just like that. Like if I just do this with my hand, you'll notice that my hand gets further out than where I wanted it to go and then comes back to where I stopped because I have momentum. And so you want to think about, those are kind of things that you start to think about as you start to animate those things, or the little tweaks to it of overcorrection, of undercorrection, of incidental weight. I mean, one of the hardest things to do is of course, animating characters, because there's so much stuff going on, and especially if they're humanoid characters, there's a lot we pay attention to. And the thing that in any of these things, but one of the things I find fascinating about doing animation is you start looking at the world differently, because you're trying to figure out, anytime you have to do something like that, you start paying attention to it. And you'll pay attention to how, like when I was doing a big shiny ship, you pay attention to how big jets work, and you realize all these little things, like they can't do certain things, they can't do this, they have a weight to it where they pull up, and and sometimes we don't do that very well, and you see that when things don't look like they have the right weight, and that happens a lot in visual effects laden movies. Then it looks wrong, and the average person can't tell you why, but they know that it doesn't look the way it should. So those are, but absolutely, you can definitely do the animation of those super sources inside of Resolve. Next question.
Next question is coming from Ranjan Chandil in Los Angeles. He says, are there any animation AI or AR tools that are helpful to those who don't draw to get quick animations created?
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
I don't know about AR and AI. They're probably flooding in, but one thing I will say, and it's relative to the last question as well, these principles of keyframe animation and things like Alex was describing with ease in and particularly overshoot and snapback and things like that, they've been known for such a long time that they're built often into the libraries of even relatively modest animation tools. I know when I'm working in Final Cut and open up a subset of motion and maybe bring in a Motion VX template that has a really nice pattern of, oh, I love the way that arcs in and then wobbles and settles. You can often do what Alex was talking about, which is open that in motion, look at how the person who coded it did that, and often you'll find they just used a behavior that you can put on your own thing that will allow that action to work with your asset as opposed to the one that was in the original Motion VFX things. I often buy Motion VFX templates just to steal a particular thing that I know my client would love and take it out of that and move it over into what I'm doing. So these libraries are known, and I can't imagine that AI and AR, these tools are going to know these things and they're going to use them and they're going to build it in. So I can see it getting more and more automated over time as these things get imported.
Yeah, I think that it is the behaviors in general for whatever animation is those really make a big difference as far as how that how that looks. So I think that it is it makes it a lot easier for you to get a lot of things done very quickly, and it's one of the things, again, Motion does it really well. There's a lot of great tools inside of Cinema 4D. There's a lot of great tools inside of Motion Math in After Effects that can do a lot of those things for you. So there's a lot of things that can be built up to make those things work. Let's go to the next question.
Christian Ortiz in South Florida is up next. He says, what tools can you use to display objects on a website? With Apple AR Quick Look, you can display an AR experience from a link on your web page. Has anyone used something like this, like the 3JS library or 3Js library for displaying 3D on the web? And he's got a link there.
I am not as familiar with the 3JS. So it's this is a JavaScript for I imagine 3D here, and when I click on their stuff, I am not able to see an actual example. So they have lots of links to things that don't seem to go anywhere that has 3D. so that's probably.
I did see one that was a VR laden one, but I wasn't sure on how you got that onto a web page to use. It was more like you plugged in your Oculus or whatever and went from there.
I think you need a specialized JavaScript parser to get that to load and play.
No, it just looks like they're. I think that the thing that I think it's interesting that they, this is an example of a company, of an organization that wants to promote something. So they promote everything that might use their product, but they're not picky enough about how to show off the product. So they really need deep links to the product being used, not links to a web page that might have it somewhere inside, because then you click. I clicked on like 6 of them and I ended up with places that don't have that. Next question.
Roz McNulty in Vancouver, Canada is up next and says, could you discuss pre-made animations for Final Cut by third parties, Final Cut Pro plugins, basically? Yeah, I mean, the ones that the most popular ones right now for that I know of are both Alex 40 Goldner has a bunch of them that are built out. So he's sometimes on our panel and he makes a lot of great ones, as well as Motion VFX. I mean, those guys are just prolific in putting things out that are there. Go ahead, Bill. I think Roger Bolton's site Core also has a link to a big plugin list that tries to be pretty comprehensive about everything. It won't tell you what's good, and there may have good and bad in there, but I wish I could remember the URL, but I don't. It's like fxplugins.com or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah. So, but as far as animations go, there's lots of plugins, but the generators, Ripple Training has a couple that they've built. Motion VFX and Alex Forty Goldner are the ones. I think those three brands represent 98% of what I've used in the last 10 years. Inside of the Final Cut Motion environment. Next question. Oh, go ahead, Jeffrey.
Just really quick, you can use other programs and then import them into Final Cut Pro, but once again, they might not be stable. You might have to do some tweaking.
And if you're listening to this and you want us to go longer, ask some questions. Otherwise, this will be a real short trip. So, but that's fine. We're fine with us. Next question.
Dave Troutman in Edmonton, Canada is up next. And he says, is the test tracking feature in editors and motion considered animation in your mind? I wonder if that's text tracking. I wonder if...
Yeah, I think that it is either way, tracking. It is. I mean, especially because a lot of times you might override some of that tracking. You might say, okay, well, you had keyframes here, but we're going to do something else there. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I was just going to say, a lot of the code in Final Cut is, in editors in general, they steal from their other products that are more specialized. I would imagine, and I don't know this for a fact, but I would imagine in Premiere, some of the text handling abilities probably come from After Effects, some of the more sophisticated one. I know for a fact that in Final Cut, a lot of the text handling is done by a subset of the code from Motion. They just literally port some of the routines from one into the other, and that's why there's a good design single direction integration between what you can design in Motion directly into your browser in Final Cut to be able to use things easier. So text tracking, I suspect, is code, again, that began its life in the much more complex and much more sophisticated text handling world of Motion, and then made its way into the main editor so that we have those same tools. There's a lot of animation and special effects in text handling in Final Cut that I don't think would be there if it wasn't for the fact that it was just porting stuff from Motion to be able to do that.
Next question.
Ranjan Chandil in Los Angeles says, the hardest part of animation for me is the translation of my movement in real life to the screen. Are there any trackers or gloves that would simulate human movement to keyframes?
There's lots of trackers that will do that. It is but it's just a matter of how much you want to spend. The good news is that a lot of the stuff has dropped in price dramatically. So a lot of the match what we call motion capture, which we'll maybe do another chat on in the future. But a lot of that, motion capture is what you're looking for, and sometimes hand trackers. There's a variety. Natural Motion is a company that makes a bunch of the tools that are out there for that. You also have face trackers, so that if you want to take a face and push it into animation, there are a variety of tools there to make that happen. So there's definitely lots of ways for us to grab onto the real world and put it back into. And the thing to remember is that now a lot of those will generate not so much keyframes, but they'll just generate raw data of what that's there. So it's not really keyframing it in the same way. But there's people have done a lot of crazy animations. Remember, you don't have to just hand animate it, and you don't have to just track it. You can say, I have a parameter over here, and I want to attach that parameter to something over here. So for instance, I might take the volume of this volume and say, I want you to take so this is where you start to get into these dynamic connections. So I have a waveform here. I want you to connect the dB of this volume to the Y scale of that block. And now that block will bounce up and down based on the Y scale. So you can build meters and everything else. So you can create relationships between one set of data that you may be tracking, whether that's audio or video, to an animation, and drive a given parameter from that initial piece. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I was just going to say, so for the rocket launch, one of the things, and it's no surprise because we've talked about it on office hours, we've been trying to populate a control room with metahumans, other people, Nick and other folks who are far more talented with this. But I went through the experience of building a metahuman and porting over there. It was the most complicated weird, fun, but frustrating things I've ever done. And to this question, the thing that was the most frustrating about it is that you're in your MetaHuman creator and you're trying to make it look at least a little bit like you, but there were so many possibilities and so many things to go. And so I'm finding myself looking in mirrors going, what do my eyebrows really look like? And how can I reshape this character's eyebrows to come? And I failed miserably. I mean, the character that I ended up with in the amount of time I had to do it looks almost nothing like me. And I think they have something built into it where you tend looking better than your actual self because most of your flaws are kind of managed. So, but it's very complicated. So I was hoping there would be something where I could just take a photo of myself and that would map into the AR.
There's a rumor that they have the tool, that the tool exists to drive those things where it can take a picture. You can take a picture and that MetaHumans internally, the rumor is that they're capable of doing that, but they don't want to do that because it could create, when you think about deep fakes and other things like that, if it's able to take a series of photos and just turn it into a thing. But we should watch the MetaHuman space very closely as we get closer to the Game Developers Conference. So, we're going to see, there's kind of, fortunate for us, there's basically an arms war when it comes to a lot of these things that's between Unity, Epic, and NVIDIA. So those are the big three. And there's rumors that NVIDIA is going to have a lot to talk about related to the Omniverse. Epic is going to talk about the metaverse, and Unity is going to talk about, versus.
Yeah.
Versus. No, Unity is its own thing. I don't know what they're going to talk about, but the mixed verse. Anyway, next question.
Interesting. Fascinating times we live in. Albie Lopez in San Antonio says, anyone use any mobile animation apps for iPads or iOS? This would be primarily for social media and quick turnaround time. There have been impressive animation VFX on some creators. I know there is a video editor and CapCut working in that space.
I have not done any animation inside of the mobile space, inside of my phone or on iPads. I think there's also we should look at that more. So go ahead, Bill.
Well, one of the spaces where they're kind of sort of doing that is with Memojis and other Animojis and other things where they're attaching facial recognition through your phone camera into relatively simple sprites and mapping some action to that. So there's certainly a lot of creators. And I know that I'm trying to think of Voila and some other little iPad, iOS applications that I've had that can be kind of fun in that area. So there's a lot of development working with the powerful tools in these iDevices to enable a kind of a piece of this.
Next question.
JJ McKenna in San Rafael, California. What are some tablet software packages that include the graphic interface for folks who love to draw with the same power of a tool like Blender or Motion?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
There's a lot of people that like Procreate, and I see a lot of TikToks on people drawing for that. And the best part about Procreate is that you can transfer it over to different things, and including with the question before, actually turn it into something more animated than just still from there.
And are you able, with Procreate, able to actually animate, or is it still just? I don't know if it does.
I don't think so. I think if it does, it's very basic. But you have to pretty much take it. I've seen a lot of people end up taking it into something like After Effects and making cartoons and things like that.
Yeah, I have to think about. Yeah, I mean, I don't know of any. I mean, again, it's just not been a space that I've spent much time in. We'll have to take a look at that more. Next question.
JJ McKenna in San Rafael, California. Are there what are some? Oh, no, sorry. That was the last one. Danny Law. Here we go. Danny Law. Is there an app on the Mac for animating stick figures? He used Sticks way back, which is now not compatible with Catalina or Higher.
I don't know of any other than building sticks and then animating them in a typical 2D, either into the best one ever was that there was the martial arts one on like 3 floors. Have you ever seen the stick figure fight scene? There's a fight scene in stick figures that I just thought, hold on, let me see. Let's see if we can find it really quickly. Yeah, this is the wonder of YouTube. Stick figures. But it is, let's see, fight scene. Let's see if this comes up with, yeah. So, 15
While you're
years,
doing that,
15 years ago.
Boinks used to make some software that would do something similar to that.
Yeah, the one that I was thinking about here is this one here. So let's see here. So you'll hear it through my mic, I think.
Dennis has one running in graphics too.
This is this was done, I think this is 15 years ago. It's just, but what it shows you is how much you can get done with stick figures. Like this is like, it's actually, and this is all, just all hand animated with, but yeah, it's kind of
I think they used Microsoft Paint for that too.
Yeah, I don't know what he used there, but it was whatever it was done well. I know that at the time it came out, I definitely wanted to figure out how to do more of this, but anyway, it's cool. It was that was one of the OG of stuff that we saw, of viral. I mean, when you think 15 years back, YouTube was still a fledgling. It didn't come out on YouTube. It was like a Flash. I think it was a Flash animation or something that we saw long ago. So it's very very old animation. But so Danny, you don't know of any that have come out of that. That's I think that's still I don't know. I don't even know what that was made on. So yeah, it's interesting.
It says Animator versus Animation 4 was what it came out on.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's definitely, if you're looking for stick figures in specifically, that's a thing. And then there's also 2D animation tools, and so there's those are the Toon Boom is one that's very, very popular for that kind of thing. So Toon Boom is really designed around 2D animation. Of course, you can do that 2D animation in After Effects as well. And there's, a couple other ones that we've done, but Toon Boom is probably the one that is the most well-known in the area as far as 2D animation. Next question.
Ranjan Chandil in Los Angeles, California says the food sequence in the new Pixar film Turning Red is so beautiful. If you have seen this, what did they do differently? It doesn't seem like anything I've ever seen before.
Wow. Now I need to see Turning Red. I saw it go by last night and I was like, oh, there's not enough time tonight to watch it. So I'm definitely going to watch it probably over the weekend. So we'll ask that question next week because I'm going to watch it with the kids. It's a Pixar film. It's what we do. No, next question.
JJ McKenna San Rafael says, are there particular settings to configure in a canvas to ensure that the resolutions match when adding an animation to a presentation, particularly for streaming?
Generally, we try to stick inside of 1920 by 1080 or 30 or 16 by 9. So if you're going to do it for streaming or you're going to do it for presentation, think of your canvas as a 16 by 9 canvas. So it might be 3840 or it might be, or I guess it will be 2160 or 1080p. Think about it in those packages. It's a lot easier if you keep it in 16 by 9 to make all of those things work. People get it creative about that thing, and it makes it harder for all of us. Next question.
JJ McKenna, San Rafael. Alex mentioned using a CAD program to animate. Are there any CAD programs that have iterated to help demonstrations of change order requests for field installers?
I don't know of any. I mean, the CAD program I used, I don't even know if it's still around anymore. I mean, it was long. It was 30-some years ago, 33 years ago that I did that animation. I don't know of any, and I used to build like logos in it, which is not the right program for that. I don't know of any that show those, that animate those. Chris Fritchie probably know more about that than I do. Next question.
Robert Soji at Los Angeles. What motion VFX packages do you recommend for Final Cut Pro that is a good introduction to motion VFX? Maybe it depends.
Yeah, what I would say is go to Motion VFX and just find ones that look nice to you. Like that is, I mean, that's really the key there is in open and get it. But it's note that if you open those in Motion, those are Motion files. So if you really want to learn a lot, it is a master's class. You could probably just, if you if you took Mark Spencer's class on motion, like the Ripple training thing on motion, you did all of those, and then you go into Motion VFX and start tearing apart their projects, you'll probably learn everything you need to know about broadcast graphics.
That's a master
literally.
class.
Yeah, it's incredible, that what they do there. They have a team that's all they do. That's all they do is make pretty graphics, and they keep on putting out new ones. And so it is a great cheat too. I mean, I've definitely used them, and I need this to look way nicer than I have time to make it look, or the skill, to be honest with you. Like, they do things inside of Motion that I can't, that I go, oh, like I open it up and I'm like, what did they do there? And I'm like, ooh, that was very smart. And I do that every time I open one of the Motion VFX ones. Anyway, go ahead, Bill.
Well, and the other thing is that they do tend to follow trends. So, for example, when everybody was starting to use on-screen representations of Instagram messages or something, within a week or so, Motion VFX and other companies had packages that you could use to open up and populate with things, so that it really is a very fast shortcut to getting the kind of contemporary graphics that follow changes in the market. If you get a brilliant commercial or a brilliant movie sequence, it's not unheard of for those people to come up with something that's a little bit like it, that you can now use to be a little more contemporary in the look of things. When Zoom got hugely popular, all of a sudden there were a lot of templates for these things that gave you a Zoom-like grid, because that's what designers wanted to work in, because it was in the consciousness. So that's helpful too about these companies.
Next question.
J.J. McKenna says, how often are the boundaries of a canvas cropped for the final product? The greatest animated web series, Home's Star Runner, frequently had graphics off screen.
You can definitely. So there's typically what we consider for graphics. We have the old fashioned thing to talk about is you have action safe, which is 10% in, and then you have title safe, which is 20% in. And so the idea is that in the old days, that you would never go out of title safe if you have something someone has to read. And then anything that they have to see in completion was 10%. And this is because most monitors in the old days of TVs overscanned. So there was a rough edge. There was actually, in an old TV that was scanning, there'd be a rough edge that didn't look nice, down here. And so what they would do is they would literally just put part of the bezel over it so that you wouldn't notice it. But that would cut off part of the image, up to 10% of the image. And so that's why you would always consider it to be action safe, because that might be gone, and title safe to make sure it's not butted right up against it. Nowadays, we see the full frame almost all the time. And so that's less important as far as what's safe and what's not. Next question.
Peter Moore, Auckland, New Zealand, up next. Years ago, I had an Atari ST 1040 FM, and it was that versus the Commodore Amiga. Back then, there was a lot of research and chats about collision detection, which I know is mainly for gaming. Does this apply to animation, and if so, how is it used?
Yeah, it's used a lot, actually. So collision detection basically means that I have an object and I have a surface, and when I hit that surface, I want the object to stop and interact with that surface. And so it's figuring out the collision. And there's a couple different ways to do that. One is what we call a boundary box collision, which says, if I have an object, I only have to worry about what its boundaries are. It may not be totally accurate, but it's a lot easier to calculate because I only have 3 or 6 sides to worry about. So I have a boundary box collision, or you have a geometric collision. And the geometric collision, depending on how many polygons you have, can be really complicated, because now you're saying, I actually want to pay attention to the geometry of what part of the foot, is hitting and how it's hitting. And if something's curved, I only want it to happen when the right part's hit. And so you have, so that makes it a lot easier to, make those collisions. And then you can also, to interact with things, I'm going to see if I can find this really quickly. Let's see. You can, see if I can find someone, and then there's, like this is, someone did a really good one that I'm just trying to find, where what you can do is, someone did this great one where they had, they built something that was, is it Legos? they sorry, I'm just trying to find someone put it up and I just can't think of where it was. I remember I highlighted it somewhere, but I can't find it. But what they did was if you look at it, even something like this, hold on, welcome. This takes collision to a different level. So this is, again, in cinema. And so what you're seeing here is, he has broken these into or it's breaking up. And so this is actually not only collision, but you can see he's moved an object through it. And this gets into, again, things that we can't necessarily do things that we don't want to try to hand animate. You don't want to hand animate all those little pieces, but you can have something basically colliding with it, and it will, you can see that that's all procedural animation. So you're setting up a set of rules, and you're talking about how, and those are all colliding with each other. So they're falling apart and then colliding with each other as well. And so, that collision process can get, very, very complicated, as we go into that. And that's where there is a lot of power, where you want to, as best you can, only animate what you have to. So you animate the things that you have to, and then you let the computer simulate a lot of the things if you can, because it's going to be oftentimes, sometimes it's less lifelike, but many times it's more lifelike, to do it that way. Let's see here. And I got to get a better way to do this here. I know I keep on hacking on Synergy, but it was so great for a small amount of time, and I still haven't really recovered from what happened there. So my whole system is kind of backwards and inside out. Next question.
Robert Soji in Los Angeles says, what's a good app or program that can do simple people animation for representing an idea for a film scene?
Go ahead, Bill.
I don't remember the name of it, but just the other day, Jeffrey Orthwine and his partner in the movie that we're talking about in recurring sessions of Office Hours, there's storyboard creators that are specifically for that. And that's what it's called in the film industry, is storyboarding. So I think there's a couple of competing passages. He recommended one that they used and showed it to us on the show, but I don't remember the name of it.
I believe it's Storyboarder by Wonder Unit. And great. And that one for, basic layout is a really, really good one. Yeah. It looks, I haven't gotten to use it, but looking at what Jeffrey was able to throw together, I think that it's a pretty good, so I would definitely take a look at it. And I'm going to see if I can get those guys to come on and talk about it a little bit. Next question.
Stefan Fischer, Würzburg, Germany. Is there an online course the panel can recommend for beginners?
I think that would depend on whether you're trying to do 2D animation or 3D animation. There's a Animation Mentor. If you're doing 3D, Animation Mentor is like one of the standards at this point, as far as how that goes. If you're looking for something online, it's not cheap, but it is Animation Mentor is for people who really want to get into the industry. And these are the animators are coming in from they're from Pixar, they're from a lot of other folks. One of the big things that a lot of these companies have found, and you're going to see a trend in this area across all of education, is that there used to be this situation where schools made money educating animators or educating accountants or programmers or whatever, and then companies would hire people out of those schools. The companies didn't want to be responsible for it. The problem is that the schools, whether it's animation or programming, can't produce enough people for the companies. And so it costs the companies money to have an inefficient supply chain. And so what we're starting to see more and more of is to widen the education to as many people as possible and potentially not even charge them for it. So Animation Mentor is not quite there yet, but you're seeing a lot of industry professionals in Animation Mentor, because they are not only training people, they're looking, they're recruiting, they're trying to find people to join, and you still get charged for it because it takes some of their time. But I think we're going to keep on seeing a trend we see it already with programming. Apple's Playgrounds, Swift Playgrounds is is a development tool for talent, as is Grow with Google. You're going to see more and more companies realize that the easiest way, the cheapest way for them to acquire talent is to make the education process much less expensive. But I think that as far as 2D animation, inside of that, I would recommend, if you're doing motion, something like Ripple training is really good. There's probably some out there in After Effects that I just don't know about. I mean, there's definitely lots of training that's out there to look at for those types of things. I know in the 3D world, Animation Mentor is a really good one for online training. Another one to look at is, anyway, I'm not sure. I got to figure out what they're doing right now. Next question.
J.J. McKenna, San Rafael. Many early web animations used Flash as their playout method after Flash was deprecated. How were these migrated for continued viewing?
I think a lot of it's lost. I mean, this is if they didn't turn them into videos, we have Flash animations that were lost. So the way in Pixel Core that we trained you to do 2D animation was that there is this, some of you are probably have followed me long enough to know about, there was a thing called attention to detail. So attention to detail was literally me throwing up an image that I took and talking about, like, pay attention to the water damage here and pay attention to this over here. And I would just circle things that I wanted to do. And then I would hand it off, and people who were training for this they would have this little pointer that would look over at this and swing over to this and everything else. And they were all animating that in an old program by Adobe, I think called Go. I think it was called Go. It was like a little Flash/HTML animator, and it would export out Flash layers that we would put back in the old days. QuickTime would take Flash layers, and so we could drop them into QuickTime. And the reason we did that was because I didn't have the money. If all the people downloading attention to details, if I had to pay for that in video, I'd go broke. And so we had to keep everything under a meg per image, and so we animated them all. But the downside of that is they're all gone. like you can't, unless you have a very old computer, you can't open them. Next question.
Roy Myers, Bel Air, Maryland, says, adding animated titles or lower thirds to video in Resolve, should you use Keynote or do it in Resolve? Absolutely do it in Resolve. Yeah. Resolve has some great behavioral tools and animation tools that are already in there. And so if you look in the Fusion area, what you're going to want to do for lower thirds in Resolve is to learn how to use the integrated Fusion tools. Those are going to be the things that give you the most control, and they've got a bunch of behaviors that are already built into it. So I think that and they're strong. They're a very strong set, and I haven't had time to deal with them. That the person that we can try to bring in, someone should have put this in the second hour, is Barry Munstertiger. It's a great name. Anyway, Barry Munstertiger I ran into him at NAB as he was demoing some of the stuff that he's done for with Blackmagic, and he's really got that thing dialed in. So maybe we'll see if we can get him on. Next question. Peter Moore in Auckland, New Zealand says, is the classic 80s tracks MTV video from Aha's Take On Me considered animation or enhanced video, and what would you call it? I would call that almost stop motion or frame by frame animation. They literally drew over that. So there was no animation tools when they did that. And there's a documentary on YouTube about it. Or maybe it's on YouTube. Maybe I bought it somewhere else. I can't remember. But really, it was incredibly painstaking for them to build that. I think the animators talk about just nearly losing their mind, doing what they were doing there, because it was all painted. It was all, just step animation, where they just went to every frame. They were literally what they call rotoscoping. So they were rotoscoping is drawing over that piece, and they were drawing all those frames, and it didn't make any sense to anybody until it was pretty far along. So it was a very scary thing. Now this is what often happens, that one of the most iconic music videos ever, but it was an incredible amount of work, and that often those things often go together, and sometimes they just are horrible messes that never turn out. So you never know which, and that's the hard part about it. But it was really interesting. All right, we made it to the end of the hour. Thank you. Thanks to the producers. There wasn't a lot of questions there at the beginning, and so it was. This was kind of an experiment. Wednesdays are kind of an experiment, and we will keep on doing it. You'll find that I will keep cutting at this, where we need to have more stuff around graphics animation. It makes a difference in all of our work, and so we'll keep on talking to it and explaining it. I'm going to see if I can get someone on to talk about something they just did recently, because it's really cool. So anyway, we'll take a look at that. Anyway,
But thank you to the producers for the great questions and keeping the conversation moving forward. Thank you to the panelists who make this all happen, and a great conversation. It's good to have people from all over the world. Even now, we got Danny coming in from Malaysia. Danny, it's great to have you. It's good to have you jumping in. So I know you asked a lot of questions. It's good to have you here. Thanks. What time is it in Malaysia?
Well, now it's close to midnight.
Oh, okay. So it's not as bad as I thought.
It's 11:57 p.m. right now.
Oh, very good. Very
So
good.
I love daylight saving times.
Another vote on the dark side.
There we go. See, there's a vote from Malaysia. That's going to sew it up. And Tom's new to our little crew. It's good to have you here, Tom. Thanks for jumping in. Tom,
thank you.
What do you do, Tom?
I'm retired.
Okay.
I've been retired since 2009.
What did you used to do?
I was the enterprise security manager for the city of Phoenix, Arizona in IT.
Nice. Very, very cool. And Danny, what do you do?
Well, I wear two hats now.
Uh-huh.
I'm basically a SI consultant.
Mm-hmm.
Primarily for training purposes, I form my sole proprietorship to train people how to use like DOS and all that. Because I've been in the circle for quite a while through the church.
Uh-huh.
Build up the system there and all that. And even now, they called me back to basically I'm their in-house consultant.
Right.
Put together all the audio, video, lighting systems, and of course, thanks to COVID, I had to learn real quick about streaming.
Right. No, absolutely. That's great. It's good to have you here. All right, we're going to go ahead and jump into after hours. Remember that we've got Richard Lavery here tomorrow. It should be great, and we'll see you there.